Hey everybody, welcome to the Crohn's Fitness Food Podcast, dedicated to raising awareness, sharing IBD stories, and offering support for those with Crohn's and colitis. Together, we can share knowledge, experiences, and help show the world the many faces of IBD. Well, hi everyone. Thank you for joining me today for another episode of the Crohn's Fitness Food Podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Gish, Crohn's warrior since 2006 and lifelong fitness fanatic. My guest today is actually a return guest. Her name is Carrie Combs, and she was on here about a month ago sharing her Crohn's journey and her inspiration to begin running marathons. She just completed the Nashville Rock and Roll Half Marathon at the end of April as a member of the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation's Team Challenge, and she is back today to talk more in depth about the emotional side of Crohn's, which is something we don't talk enough about and something we didn't get a chance to touch on last time. So she'll be talking about everything from eating habits to coping mechanisms, and she's also going to share her gear and supplement checklist for long distance running. So thank you so much for joining me today, Carrie, and welcome back to the show.
Yes, thanks for having me back. I'm excited.
I am too. So why don't we go ahead, before we start talking about all of the other things we want to get in today, why don't you do a quick little recap of just your Crohn's journey so that our audience can remember a little bit about your timeline and then just kind of fast forward to where you're at today.
Sure. So high level overview. I was diagnosed with Crohn's in 2011 and I was like 22 at that point. I did not know about IBD, Crohn's or colitis at that point in my life. So this was all very new to me. And my Crohn's was rather aggressive. I have over the years had 3 surgeries to try and get my Crohn's in remission and to get rid of some abscesses that had formed. So I'm missing some of my small intestine and colon, my gallbladder, and my appendix. But I have now been, my last surgery was kind of a turning point, and I've now been in remission for about 2 years. And really using, food, fitness, and medication to really keep myself under control.
It's a good combination, and definitely glad to hear that you're in remission and staying in remission. So you were diagnosed, I think it's been about 8 years ago, and you grew up, I think like many of us, in the processed food, kind of the fat is bad era of the 80s and 90s that I think a lot of us that grew up in that,
Yes.
we remember very well. And you also mentioned to me that you grew up to be a people pleaser. So tell me about some of these early habits that you developed as a child and how they later impacted and played into your Crohn's journey, because you've mentioned that a lot of these different habits and things that you developed really actually set you up for failure in dealing with your Crohn's disease.
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of as you mentioned, and I think, a lot of us that were around in the 80s and 90s remember when, basically the extent of our nutrition education was the food pyramid. So basically, for anyone who's maybe young enough listening to this that doesn't remember that, the pyramid basically had a ton of processed carbs at the bottom. And I think you were supposed to get 12 servings of that per day.
It was a lot.
It was a pretty substantial amount. Yeah. And then it did have, your meat and dairy. And at the very top, it had a like oils and fats and sugars was, supposed to be the smallest part. And it was all kind of, like candy, anything with fat was all just kind of lumped in, up at the top. So I never remember getting any type of, it was basically like, here's that picture, that visual. But there was no, real in-depth what makes up each of those groups, what what are these benefits that I'm getting from eating these items? So I never really thought much about nutrition. I pretty much just ate what tasted good, which I think, a lot of people do. And especially to, it was the processed foods and the quick stuff that you can grab that's already packaged was becoming, and fast food in general was kind of really exploding at that point in time. Cause I think, a lot of both of my parents worked, that was starting to, become the norm. People didn't have time for, the traditional eating your 3 square meals a day kind of, thing. So you were just kind of, eating when you were hungry and just, whatever sounded good.
Even when
when
you weren't hungry, because I remember most of my breakfasts were, if you remember, the toaster strudels.
Oh, yes.
Talk about healthy there. It was, nice toaster strudel.
They never gave you enough icing in the packet, right?
I know. I would take extra icing, and then you'd end up with a strudel without icing. So that was my breakfast. So
yes, exactly. So it was that kind of a thing, and it was a lot of, I have 2 sisters, so, my parents were also pulled of, trying to get this kid to this practice and, doing all that kind of thing. So we did eat a lot of fast food. Wendy's was down around the corner from our school. So I remember pretty much before volleyball practice, we would walk down to Wendy's and get a junior bacon cheeseburger and chicken nuggets, and then come back for practice.
And the chocolate shake, that was always mine.
Right. The Frosty.
Frosty.
Yeah. So for me, I think, food was, I just, and, anyone in my family, we just didn't know enough about it, to make smart choices.
And we trusted you mentioned the food guide pyramid. We kind of just trusted that was correct, that a lot of us just didn't even question why not eat 12 servings of grains and base our diet around
right.
That. So yeah, we didn't question it. We didn't know better. And so yeah, go ahead and keep going.
Yeah. So, so I think, as I got older, when I was probably in middle school or so, I've always had a problem with my weight, was a huge issue for me. And, obviously in hindsight, I know where some of that came from, but, it was always kind of a struggle because back also, if you look at any of the, famous people or pop stars from the 90s, the ideal woman was really thin, not necessarily not muscular, not, any type of an athletic build, just a very thigh gap, thin legs, that kind of a thing. So that was very much what was, in my mind, that was what was supposed to be normal and what I was supposed to look like. And, so, I'm thinking, okay, this is the goal I need to achieve, is this image. But I definitely I was very ill-equipped to even come anywhere near that image because I didn't know all the parts and pieces, that went into health in your body. And also that, ultimately that not everyone looks the same. So it's okay that you don't, look like those people. But, that was definitely not really the trend back then. The Victoria's Secret models were a big thing. It was very much, women were supposed to be skinny.
Like Kate Moss, I think she was one of the supermodels at the time.
Yes.
Very, very thin.
Yes. And, so that was always emotionally kind of, difficult for me because I was, much heavier than everyone in my class. I didn't, limited to was a like clothing for kids that was like, you know, super cool or trendy at the time. And like they didn't have plus sizes and things like that, so I didn't fit in those clothes, and so you feel kind of excluded from the group, you know, when you can't you know, fit into that mold. And so always kind of felt like an outsider, which then I ultimately, you know, was kind of depressed about it. So then I would eat, you know, I don't know, chocolate or, you know, something of that nature that made me feel better for a little bit. But then was obviously full circle, not helping my situation. It was really just making it worse.
You didn't have any Crohn's or digestive issues when you were growing up, did you? Those came on later, or did you have any mild kind of digestive issues when you were younger?
I had some, I did have some mild, that, you know, in hindsight, I would say probably was Crohn's. But it was, you know, it was very, very manageable. You know, not enough for me to really think, oh, this is not normal, or, you know, talk to anyone about it.
And food really became kind of an escape for you. I mean, it's something you would turn to, but then also as a reward. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the other thing too was that, you know, food became something that kind of our lives centered around, but not in a fueling your body kind of way, in a satisfaction kind of way. So, you know, if you got good grades and we were going out, you know, to eat, and if it's your birthday, we're going out to eat, and like that was how we, you know, enjoyed and celebrated, was by going out to eat. And so, of course, you know, when you go out to eat, it's like, oh, let's get an appetizer. Let's, you know, get a main meal. And then, oh, they've got dessert too. So, you know, it kind of became just common, and normal to eat whatever. And, you know, no restriction on quantity really either. You know, I just kind of ate to make myself happy. So, you know, I definitely use that as a coping mechanism. So, you know, the other piece too was, showing emotions, and, you know, I think nowadays it's a lot more commonplace for people to, you know, it's okay to feel how you're feeling, and, being real and open and honest, is a lot more accepted. But I think I was a pretty, and I still am, but I was a pretty outspoken, person. And that was, I also feel like, you know, growing up, that was kind of, people were like very caught off guard by that. And I think it, you know, kind of bothered some people, like, why, you know, why does she have an opinion, and why, like, why is she, you know, talking and whatnot about, how she feels, or how, you know, and it was kind of a keep it to yourself mentality. And I think it's interesting. I wonder a lot too, if it's, you know, if that's more where I grew up, or if that's something that's fairly common. So I don't know if you have any, you know, similar experience of those kind of, you know, outside influences of the, you know, the being skinny and the, more timid kind of female role, I guess.
Most definitely. I mean, I'm right there with you, you know, growing up in the 80s, 90s, how skinny can you be and eat your rice cake and you'll lose weight, and it's that simple, you know, but it never works. And then just kind of being female, it's like, don't, you know, you didn't want to show all your emotions, and so it's kind of, you know, even, you know, my family, it's like, you know, just don't, you know, suck it up and drive on, kind of a thing. And And then I was in the Army, so it's kind of like you got to be strong. You
Yeah.
don't want to be the weak female that's the weak link, and so you're forced to kind of hold it together and be strong and not, um, and just try to pretend like nothing is going on, really. And so it's all these different things that I think we bottle up inside, which is bad for our gut health. So
Right.
we probably destroyed our microbiomes with the stress alone, not to
Right,
mention
early on.
the toaster strudels and everything else that was coming in. So tell me a little bit more about your journey with food, because you really didn't start learning about nutrition and diet until after you got Crohn's, correct? Because it
Yes.
was when Crohn's came around, I think you mentioned that food, what used to be a reward and what used to be a happy spot in your life was now all of a sudden causing pain and just shifted everything. So talk to me a little bit more about that and kind of how that played into your diagnosis.
Yeah. So, kind of like we were just talking about here with the, obviously food was definitely a big part of my life. And I, with no restrictions. When I did get diagnosed with Crohn's, I think I mentioned in the previous podcast about how, it was actually my gallbladder had gone bad. And I had assumed that all of my symptoms were related to that. And I went about 45 days where I was literally eating just white rice was the only thing that I could eat. And it was very like depressing that all I could eat was white rice. But then from, the last 20 some years of my life, I had learned, okay, I'm not feeling well, so now I'm going to eat. And it was like, oh, wait, but I can't do that. So there wasn't anywhere to turn. It was very confusing. So I had, gone without food, which is a stress in itself enough, just on your body. And then the emotional toll that took, was very difficult because I had never gone, I'd never gone hungry before. I had never not been able to enjoy whatever I wanted. I ate whatever I wanted and now I couldn't. So I just really didn't know where to turn. So when I was waiting for an official diagnosis, because since I had had surgery, I did have to wait for my colonoscopy. So I was just kind of, given some pain medication. I remember laying in the hospital bed and the nurse had come in and I said, I just kind of broke down and I said, I don't know what, I can't go. They wanted to send me home and I said, I can't go home. I don't know how to take care of myself. And he told me, well, look up a low residue diet. I'm like, okay, like what is that? So I think that was kind of the initial start for me was, okay, this is so broken and I've got to fix it somehow. But I just didn't really have the resources. So it was, starting to find those resources.
So I want to jump in real quick and just point out what an important thing that you had said just a minute ago is just how you didn't know where to go and just saying that you didn't want to go home, you didn't know how to take care of yourself. And I think that's really important for people who are maybe newly diagnosed or even family members of really trying to understand how lost that someone who's newly diagnosed might be feeling. Just when, as you were in that situation where it's like, I can't eat anything. I don't know what to do. How do I take care of myself? And it's just kind of this feeling of, because I remember feeling the same way too, of it's like, well, what am I supposed to do? Like, where do I go from here? So I think it's important for people who are newly diagnosed to know that you're not alone if you feel like that, but maybe if it's a family member, like, we need support.
Right, right.
I think that's a key thing.
You know what? And I think that's definitely, you talk about the caregivers. When I was diagnosed, my husband and I had only been, we were high school sweethearts, so we'd known each other for quite a while, but we had only been married for a year. And another kind of piece of that puzzle was, here we are, fairly young, trying to figure out this chronic illness. And I felt a lot of guilt of initially too, of like almost like I had kind of trapped him into this because it's not like he knew I had Crohn's going into our marriage. So it's that's a lot for someone to take on, and I always kind of felt this like I was a burden, and that was a huge piece for me, with caregivers, whether it be my husband or my parents or, siblings or friends. I always just thought like, oh, well, I kind of that people pleaser piece of, well, it has to be fair. Like if they're going to help me do this, then I need to be able to pay them back somehow, or I need to be able to, make it just and balanced. And, ultimately that's very conditional. And that's why, a lot of people I'm sure that are listening to this, they probably have lost relationships with people, throughout their journey, because it kind of really, something like this shakes out those people who are your fair weather friends versus someone who unconditionally, loves and supports you.
Mm-hmm. What helped you? I might be jumping ahead. I know you had a lot of topics, but what kind of helped you to overcome that feeling of being a burden to someone? What helped you get through that process to reach a point where it's like, you know what, I'm not a burden. This is someone who loves me, wants to be here for me. And did you learn to start asking for help as well?
Yeah, so I will tell you that it's a long road. It was not something that came easily to me. And honestly, I really feel that I just have finally kind of gotten a grip on it in the last year or two, to be completely honest. Something that I kind of, got into, so after my last surgery was 2 years ago. And that was a pretty big surgery for me. I was very sick going into it, and had some, issues and some heart issues and stuff coming out of it. So it was kind of scary. It was a little, touch and go. And I think it finally made me realize that, I really needed to kind of get a grip on everything. So it led me to, put myself first. So, being that people pleaser, I had always been the person, like, I enjoy doing things for other people. And so that's kind of how I'd always been. So it was very odd for me to ask for help because I was the person that took care of others. And, not very long after my surgery, I had a really long recovery time with that surgery, because I was from having the NG tube for a very long time. I was having trouble keeping food down. Like it just, even with anti-nausea medication, I just really, I was consistently throwing up every day. And, one day I had gotten on Facebook and someone had posted this picture of a, like a teacup, and it said that that you can't pour from an empty cup. And that was just like this huge pivotal moment for me. So, I mean, completely random. But I was like, wow, like that's so true. And that's what I've been trying to do the last couple years, is give and give and, work and, maintain myself, but, take care of my family, take care of my daughter, be the best at this, and this. And I had nothing left of me to give, but I was still handing it out somehow. And it caught up to me.
Maybe it's a Crohn's thing, because I'm very much like that as well.
Yeah.
Maybe us cronies tend to take that on and internalize these things, but I'm very much the same way of just, if people ask for my help, it's like, how can I give it? And how can I run myself ragged to do these things for other people and volunteer and do these extra things? And then at the end of the day, my cup is empty. So just like the situation you are in, all of a sudden you find yourself and your cup is empty.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and I'm sure you do this as well. I still, to this day, I've gotten better about, managing what I'm doing and trying to reduce stress, but like, I can't be doing nothing. Like, I think I would go insane, of just like, people are like, oh, you should, take a break from this and that. And I'm like, but I would have more anxiety that I'm not doing, just sitting here not doing it. So, it's, trying to find that balance within yourself, to not push yourself too much, but, still try and do the things that you enjoy. But, definitely that when I saw that, I was like, okay, like I need to focus on me. So I, at that point, that's when I got into, just kind of walking and then, eventually running on the treadmill, found Team Challenge. And then that was kind of another eye-opening piece for me, because when I went to Chicago, that was the first time I met other people with IBD. And it was like, you have this instant bond, right, with people who have IBD, because you're like, I know exactly what your worst day is like. I know probably more about you than even your closest people, because I've lived that. And I know the stuff that you probably haven't even told people because you're embarrassed about it, or, you have this kind of instant bond of, going through the trenches kind of with everyone. And, so it was, I met people who had ostomies. I met people who, were children that had IBD. I met, caregivers who, just, it amazed me how much they did for their husband or child that was, sick, and, all basically as how much they gave of themselves to help them. And, just seeing all that was, kind of overwhelming, but in a good way. Just knowing that I'm not weird. I'm not, this abnormal there's other people like me.
Your self-esteem really grew through this whole process too, didn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Because, like I said, my self-esteem, I'd always kind of pretend like my weight didn't bother me, or being excluded from this or that didn't bother me. But normally the person who pretends they're not bothered by that kind of stuff is the person who is. But I definitely, self-esteem, was pretty low, through most of my teenage and, early adolescent years. And, so, also having this chronic illness that's not real cool to talk about, talking about your poop or,
Exactly.
Just random thing. I remember, in college, in hindsight, before being diagnosed, like I had, on my way to a class, I had an accident and I didn't really know why. And it seemed weird. And I just kind of, I just cleaned myself up and went on with life and pretended like it never happened. Right. Because that's weird and embarrassing and I'm not going to tell anybody. And, you just kind of think like, man, I'm a hot mess. Like, what is wrong with me? So, it definitely, for me, it was very low. I did not have much confidence. And then also too, a lot of us know when you take steroids and stuff for your medication, I mean, I just I couldn't eat enough carbs and sugar, I feel like, when I was on prednisone. And you just, balloon out and get like the moon face and all the real fun side effects of that kind of stuff. And so I'd look in the mirror and it was like, I don't even know who this person is that's looking back at me. But, like I said, that moment after surgery was just this turning point, and it's led me to many more steps that have just added to building my confidence. So, I did the team challenge, met people, and I was like, okay, there's other people like me. I'm running. So I did start to lose some weight. It was helpful for stress and everything. I was, feeling a lot better about that. And just, it kind of bleeds into other aspects of your life too, like work, being a mom, everything. Once you start to get a little more confidence, you kind of, I don't know, I feel like I felt more organized in certain areas and whatnot. And it just kind of kept me wanting more, which actually led me to, after I had done the Chicago trip, I was like, I'm enjoying this running, but I feel like I need something else, like another challenge. And so, it's one of those things you just kind of like, oh, check, I did really awesome with this. Now I'm going to do something else. So, I just kind of kept moving on. And, so I was intrigued by CrossFit, and I was like, researching by myself online, trying to figure this out. And it's so fun. I had a friend, that did it and stuff. And I had resources that I could have reached out to, but I think I was kind of apprehensive of is this, something for me, and would I fit in here? And I think, I was a little nervous about it, but I was also very intrigued at the same time. So,
were you still afraid to reach out to people at that point and ask for help and opinions?
Yes, absolutely. Google was my best friend for a long time because, there was no judgment there, right?
Yeah.
So I definitely, someone had wrote up this really great kind of research opinion about CrossFit. And it was actually a very unbiased opinion of kind of what to expect, what you should look for when you're looking for a gym and that kind of thing. So I had read through this and I was like, okay, I knew some people that went to a local CrossFit gym, CrossFit Torsion, and I'd looked at their website and it met all the checks of this thing I had looked up. So I'm like, all right, they had what they call either a fundamentals or an on-ramp program, where basically it's a more kind of one-on-one focused, where they kind of teach you all the movements, as opposed to just dumping you into a class. So I had never lifted weights before or done I played volleyball in high school, and did cheerleading. So I guess I lifted people, but other than that, I had never picked up a barbell or anything like that. So I go to this class, and Kim, who was the coach of fundamentals, she definitely played a huge part in helping me with kind of rebuild my self-esteem, which, I didn't know going into this that would be the case. But, I remember pulling up and I saw all these, like, it was kind of, I had gifted this to myself for my 29th birthday. I was going to fundamentals. That was going to be like my gift to myself. And I pulled up, and I had talked to one of the owners ahead of time, and she was like, "Oh, you can come to a class, try it out, whatever." And I remember pulling up, and one of the classes was finishing up when I got there, and they were doing like a partner workout. So they were in like groups of 2 doing this workout, and it was a real nice day. They had like garage doors up, rowers pulled out, music was like cranked, like pretty much everyone had their shirts off and stuff. And I'm like sitting in my car, and I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, and so I
Turn around, go home.
Right. I literally just sat there for a little bit, and I was like, okay, Carrie, get out of the car. Like, just get out of the car. And I finally got out of the car. And it's so funny because now, like, I think of all the people that were there that day, and like why I was ever intimidated by them. It seems kind of ridiculous now. But going to those classes, they taught me, all this new stuff. And I'm like, oh man, there's so much going on. There's, all these different lifts. And, I also learned that I thought I could jump rope, but I was not doing that correctly either. So, relearning all of these things, pull-ups. I was like, oh, I could never do a pull-up, and all this stuff that I thought like I could never do that. They were showing me how to do this stuff. And as each class, I always felt like I hit this next point of, wow, I didn't think I could do that, and I just did it. And it kept building and building and building. And then, so this was like August I had started. And then in November, that was about the 1-year anniversary from my surgery. And, I remember doing this workout, and it had a lot of like overhead movements. So, there were like pull-ups, but there was also, so for anyone who has not lifted weights, a clean and jerk is basically, you're taking the barbell from the ground, bringing it pretty much up to chest level, and then you're pushing it overhead. So that the very overview of that. So it had, quite a bit of those in that. And, I was able to do 55 pounds, on the barbell. And at the end of the workout, I started to get really I started to cry, because I remembered that a year ago, I wasn't able to brush my hair. Like, I couldn't hold my hands up over my head to brush my hair. And I just put 55 pounds over my head multiple times. Like, never did I think I would be at this place a year after my surgery.
How much did your cup fill up after that, when you realized what you were capable of?
Quite a bit. And the other piece too was, when I went there the first time, I saw all these really like strong women who were, had thick thighs, were muscular built, and they looked awesome. And I wanted to be like that. And I was like, where have these people been all my life, right? Like this is, kind of, the piece I felt like I had been missing. And, the awesome thing that I always loved about CrossFit was it was very community based. People cared about your goals. People cared about your struggles. People would check on me if I missed class for a week. People would be like, hey, you haven't been here. And most of the time they'd be like, are you having trouble with your Crohn's? Are you okay? Let us know if you need anything. And it was like, oh, wow. Like, there's other people who, want me to succeed. And then in turn, like, I want them to succeed. And, seeing everyone's successes is just like, you get on this kind of emotional high, a lot of times. But it was definitely, so like I said, Kim had been this coach that I had. And, the other thing that she really impressed upon me was that, people really care that you're a good person, not about how you look in your clothes or, the superficial stuff. People aren't going to remember what you deadlifted or what, what size of clothes you wore, but they'll remember that time that you were nice to them or that you held the door for them or, those kind of things. And, so it was really trying to like shift my focus away from, I have to hit this weight number on a scale, or I have to, look a certain way, to, more of performance-based goals. That was a huge kind of shift in my thinking that, it definitely took me a solid year and a half to, and I feel like it's still a constant thing. But, my goal is to finish a half marathon. My goal is to finish, now a full marathon. Having those goals, when you're working towards those goals, some of those other things end up being side effects, like losing weight or, looking the way you want, or those kind of things just kind of fall in place. And it's a lot less stressful, when you're when you have this exciting goal that you're going towards and, you're chipping at each day. Yeah. Whereas I remember when it was like, oh, I need to be whatever, 125 pounds or 130 pounds. You'd literally just like get on the scale every day, and then, it'd go up or down a pound, and you just felt like, I'm going nowhere and I don't know what, to do with myself.
And you stress about it constantly, which then makes Crohn's worse because you're stressing.
Right. Yeah. And then you've got, cortisol and stuff too. You're not helping yourself at all by stressing out over it.
Just as you said a second ago, just finding a passion, I think, makes such a difference, where you were just talking about how having the goal, something to work for, the marathons, and just finding something different to focus on, something you're passionate about, something you love, having that goal. Really, you don't realize until it happens how much less stress it does take away. Just as you were saying, everything else kind of falls into place, and you can really just engage and enjoy working towards that goal. It really does make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that's definitely, fitness has obviously in the last couple of years become so much more for me, than it ever was, even in high school or college or anything. And then, kind of back to the food aspect, I've probably played around with every diet under the sun, at some point. And I know, kind of back when I was in high school, I remember thinking, my thought was, oh, if I eat, because low fat diets were super popular, that was the way you were going to be skinny. And I remember thinking like, well, if I don't put any fat in, then it'll just eventually like fall off. Right. So, I remember just eating like non-fat yogurt and pretzels and just like,
Yeah.
something with basically no real substantial value to it. And it's funny because I think about, we don't know what causes Crohn's. But I was talking to a friend this weekend and I said, we don't know what causes it, but I can tell you that my, up and down, like fad dieting and not knowing what's good to put in my body, putting a bunch of processed stuff in my body, none of that definitely helped any of this.
Didn't help, and it probably made you susceptible for whatever environmental or genetic trigger, whatever it was.
Yep.
It probably just allowed the Crohn's gene to turn on and activate because you created a horrible gut environment.
Exactly. And, because I kind of think about that too, because it seems like every year the numbers keep growing of the amount of people that are diagnosed with IBD. And I've also, kind of run into some people who didn't get diagnosed because it used to, kind of the main bulk of us get diagnosed in our 20s. But I feel like I'm meeting more and more people who are like, oh, I was 55 or, something that's, or I was super young, kids and stuff. And it seems to be kind of morphing a little bit. And it's like, okay, well, something, something obviously changed, that has kind of increased these numbers. So, that kind of stuff, I definitely think plays a role, in all of it.
I definitely think it does. Just the amount of chemicals that are in the processed foods, the amount of chemicals and toxins that are just in our environment, and just the number of things that are weakening our gut linings. And, maybe some people are impervious to it,
Right.
but there's a whole slew of us that it certainly does not help the path we were going down. So you've really had quite, looking back, you've had quite a transition and quite a journey from first being diagnosed where you felt ill-equipped to handle kind of just the mental and physical aspects of it. You went from not knowing what to do, viewing food as a reward, bottling up your emotions, not asking for help. And you've learned through this whole process, and it's taken, as you've said, probably the full 8 years to finally get to this point. And a lot of it's due to CrossFit and fitness, but building that self-esteem, filling up your own cup, and now being, I assume you're at a point where you feel stronger and better able to continue battling Crohn's in this way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things that, it might sound corny or whatever, but all that basically, like, I mean, fitness has really saved my life because I don't think I would, I definitely would not be in the position that I'm at this point if I hadn't gotten involved, in that. And, it's definitely, it's not easy. Like I said, it's, you've been conditioned, a lot of us, for many decades of, eating a certain way or kind of doing what feels good and whatnot. And then to actually, have to completely change your lifestyle. That is not easy, and it is not for the faint of heart. So, I definitely understand the struggle. And I definitely have days where I'm like, I just want to binge eat something, or, you just like, you want to fall off the wagon. And, that's when it's good to have that support system around you. Because on those days where I'm like, I see maybe like my daughter got a bunch of Easter candy, and I was like, she got this peanut butter egg, and peanut butter and chocolate is kind of my downfall. But, like, I had like a couple, little slices of it, and then my husband's like, hey, like, I'm not trying to be mean, he's like, but you know how you're going to feel after that. And I'm like, I know you're right. And then I'm like, you know what? I got to the point where I'm like, get it out of the house. Like, I just have to remove it because I know at this moment I don't have the self-control to handle it. So I just need to get it out of here. So, you know, having people to kind of help you, when you have those days of, oh man, like, I just want to go back to the days before, you know, before I had Crohn's kind of thing. And, cause you have those and you feel that.
We do. And whenever I have those days, it's almost part of me kind of just, as much as I, like, the best way to describe it for me is it's almost as if I could have this escape of pretending like I didn't have Crohn's. Like when I'm just tempted, I just want to eat, you know, a bowl of ice cream and pretend like I'm normal and that this isn't going to bother me. And you kind of just, it's almost just this longing of, I just want to eat all this crap and I'm feeling bad. And why don't I just eat more and feel worse?
Right.
And it makes no sense really, but
yeah. And I think I've definitely had times too where, like, when, you know, when I remember before my last surgery, when I was just getting really sick and not feeling well, I was pretty much like, it doesn't matter. Everything makes me feel sick. So I'm just going to do what I want, basically.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then it just becomes this kind of like reckless abandon. But that definitely, yeah, you do have those days, but, you know, I feel like I've gotten to the point too where I'm having less of those days. You know, it's not, it's not as much as, you know, when you're first, you know, kind of starting out of getting back on track and, you know, figuring these things out. I definitely had more of the days where I just wanted to quit and wanted to, you know, binge eat and do whatever I wanted and, just kind of give up on the process. But, you know, as I keep going, I think I keep, you know, it's kind of that building that self-esteem and knowing and building that understanding of, you know, knowing the benefits that you're getting, from, you know, eating better, exercising, and how, you know, how much better that makes you feel.
I think there's a little bit of acceptance in there too, in the sense that for me, it's almost like I continually have to re-accept the fact that I have Crohn's. I have to remind myself and it's like, all right, I'm choosing to not eat this Reese's peanut butter cup, or I'm choosing to not do this because I accept the fact that I have Crohn's and it's going to do this to me. And kind of it is what it is, but I know that there are things I can do that will help me to feel stronger and to help me get through that. And it's kind of like this cycle just keeps, you know, replaying itself in my
right
in my head.
Absolutely. And that's, I think you always kind of, you know, you were talking about kind of reminding yourself that you have Crohn's. I think I remember, this past fall, my daughter's in kindergarten, so she brings home all these lovely germs with her. And, she got this horrible stomach virus. And, we had, like, I bleached everything and been like 3 days, and I thought, oh, we're good. Oh no. Then I got sick. And when you, like, it's hard when you get like a stomach virus and you have IBD, it takes you a long time to kind of recoup from that. And I just remember thinking like, wow, like I had forgotten how terrible it feels to throw up multiple times a day and to, you know, to have those. And I thought, how did I survive years ago when that was happening? And, you know, it was kind of a surreal moment of like, man, I knew I was better, but I guess I didn't realize how much better, I was until basically that was taken away. So that was an interesting, just kind of, you know, realization for me of, where I had been and how far I've come. And that I don't want to feel like that again. So I'm going to do whatever I can to, put that at bay.
It's a great point, and I know I've definitely had those moments where I'll get symptoms coming back because for the most part I do, pretty well, but on the days when symptoms come back or things come back, it's like, holy cow, I forgot how horrible this this
Mm-hmm.
feels, and you block out a big part of that, or at least I blocked out a big
Yep.
part of it just because you don't want to remember it. And in a way, it's funny, it makes me think of, because you were talking about, not reaching out for help and kind of taking care of everything yourself. And I have a lot of those same tendencies. And especially when it comes to Crohn's, it's like, I don't want to show weakness, and I can manage this. And it's almost like I'm trying to just pretend like I don't have it almost.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets me into trouble because then I get into this position to where when symptoms do come up, A, I remember how bad it is.
Yeah.
But then B, then I actually feel guilty about reaching out to my doctors, and it's like I feel like I'm a burden. Like, I'm sorry to bother you, but I
Right.
got all this going on with, this or that with my stool, and let's talk about my poop, and
Right.
I feel guilty, and I shouldn't feel that way, and so if people are out there listening feeling the same way, don't feel that way.
Right.
But
Absolutely.
it is that ongoing process of just learning to fill our cups, learning to ask for help. And I think we have to keep reminding ourselves to do those things, especially when our tendency is to not do those things.
Yeah. I think, so another, kind of reducing stress thing. So, between the fitness and in the, better eating, just a little cleaner eating and that kind of thing. I think so. My diet currently, I tend to be kind of a lot of lean protein, and I can handle certain vegetables that are cooked,
Mm-hmm.
and so some like green beans are normally okay, or I actually found quinoa is kind of a random thing that is a little higher fiber, but I can tolerate it.
Mm-hmm.
Squashes, that kind, and onions and mushrooms. So I have some variety now. I've definitely kind of built in stuff over the years. It's definitely been a huge process. But that's kind of the stuff that I tend to stick to. Dairy is a no for me. I do use like almond milk or coconut milk. So like some stuff that I'll make, with that, I might eat some stuff that looks like I'm eating dairy, but it's really just, almonds. But, that's like giving up dairy. That was a really difficult thing for me because I love to sit down and eat ice cream, and,
Mm-hmm.
I literally put cheese on everything. So, but I finally was like, okay, again, you're pretending that this isn't affecting you,
Yeah.
but it is. And so, when I finally got rid of that, how much better I felt was, I mean, even just after like a couple weeks,
Mm-hmm.
was pretty substantial. And, absolutely some people can tolerate it, and that's great if you can. But, for me, I just had all sorts of terrible symptoms anytime I would eat dairy, and it was like, okay, I've got to get rid of it. So,
Kind of that acceptance piece again of just saying, all right, this is the hand I was dealt, and this dairy is not working for me, so I'm cutting it out and make the best of it.
yep. So that's kind of, general overview of what I eat, but, it doesn't fit in any like, I mean, I guess probably I would be like closest to like Whole30 maybe
Yeah.
of what I eat, but again, not 100%. So I don't fit into any particular, diet you're going to research, because I do think it is, and it used to make me so mad when because I originally was like, what am I supposed to eat? Like, is this like an allergy? What do I do? And they're like, well, it's different for everyone. And that used to infuriate me, because I'd be like, just tell me what to eat. Like, I just want to know.
Yeah.
And, but it really is. And it ultimately,
really is.
I realized I had to basically eliminate and then add back in to figure out what was going to work for me, and what works for me isn't going to work for everybody else. Unfortunately. So,
well, and while it's true that we're all different, the underlying common things that do seem to be common amongst us, and not just for Crohn's, but cut out the processed foods.
Yep.
Cut out the sugar and the junk food, and then go from there. So at least that can be a starting point for everyone. Cut out the junk.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and I think I've said this before, that, I don't know how much some of my sensitivity is just from missing pieces of my intestinal tract. If I was in remission and still had every organ I was born with, then I might be able to tolerate dairy, or I might be able to tolerate some stuff that I have eliminated from my diet. So, I think that kind of stuff throws a kink in it too. And that's why a lot of us are so different, as to what we can handle and what we can't. So
we're coming up on an hour, and I don't want to keep you all night, but before we wrap up, I want to know, how did the Nashville Half Marathon go? And how much did you and your team raise for the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation?
Yeah, so it was a lot of fun. It was a really nice, we had good weather for the weekend. It was definitely a little warm. Nashville is a very challenging course. It is very hilly. And especially where I live is fairly flat. You can maybe find some hills here and there, but nothing, not really like Nashville. So, tough course, and it was definitely warm. So, hydration was definitely, I knew that was kind of going to be a battle for me the whole time. The first half I did pretty good. I was feeling good. I do take, salt pills before I run. Helps. And then also multiple days ahead of time, I'm really good about getting in my water. And then I also use Noon electrolytes, which are like a little Alka-Seltzer type tab that you throw in water. So it's kind of like Gatorade without all the junk in it. And so I, make sure that I'm hydrating multiple days ahead of time, because hydration's not really something you can if it's 3 hours before the race and you haven't really been drinking for the last 3 days, that's not a good start. So, so I try and keep up with that. So I've been doing that. But I knew with the sun, that adds, especially because I think it had only been warm for 1 day in Ohio. So it was, really the first warm
shock.
Warm day I was out running, which definitely makes a difference. But I kind of was just like, okay, I'm going to, my plan was kind of to just keep moving, walk up the hills, run down them, and run on any flat ground was kind of how I had broken it up in my mind. And that worked pretty well. I definitely towards about mile 10, I was starting to get some of the my typical signs of dehydration, which are really kind of puffy hands and a little bit of a nausea feeling. And so that's when I know I have a hydration belt, that I wear on long distance runs. So it has 2 water bottles, on it. So I usually have plain water, and then I have Noon in the other one. So I had been good about using those, throughout. And then, at mile 10, they had at all of the, any race that you go to that's even like semi well prepared has, medical tents throughout the race. So I stopped at the medical tent and literally got packets of salt, which you literally just kind of like you would see at a fast food restaurant to like salt your fries or something with. So I literally just tore the top of those off, and you just kind of take it like a shot and rinse it with some water. And, that helps a ton, because that's my biggest thing is I lose, a lot of that, like I sweat it out. I set what I would consider a Crohn's PR, that I didn't have to stop for the restroom for 13.1 miles. So that was the first time I'd ever gone that long, without having to stop. So that was exciting, and, just another piece of, I always thought like, I always have to factor that in to my pace of like, well, I'm going to have to stop for the bathroom at usually like mile 2.5, and then I'm going to have to stop again here at, mile 10. So that was good. I definitely, I had hoped to finish in 2 hours and 40 minutes. And it took me 2 hours and 57 minutes. So
close.
Definitely, I was to say, I blew my pace, but I was still, that was 10 minutes under my personal best. So
awesome.
I was still very happy with how I did. And especially like it was not an easy course. Yeah. So to still get a PR on that, I was very happy with. It was awesome too, because I met up with Jim, who has also been on the podcast and, also done Team Challenge. He did the full marathon, and, so met up with him at the expo there. And, it's neat to, all these people that I've, that I kind of know and whatnot through Instagram and, social media, and through this IBD community. It's nice to be able to meet up with people in person and, kind of, again, you have those similar stories and whatnot. So
instantly connected, and
exactly.
Funny what a small world it can actually feel like in times like that.
Yeah. Yeah. 'Cause we had actually met through, so we're both Noon ambassadors. So, basically like we really like the Noon product. And so we signed up to, they give us a discount, and, we use their product basically. So, we had actually met there based on being, 2 people with Crohn's. And then, I had been listening to your podcast, and then I saw his the one that he was on. I was like, oh my goodness, and it's just funny how those connections start to build. And then he was going to Nashville, and I was like, oh, so am I. So, so it was nice to meet up. And, I did this race. I did what's called Race in Orange through Team Challenge. So basically that allows you can pick whatever race you want to do, and you can set your own fundraising goal for it. So I did that, and, raised about, I think, a little over $700, for the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation.
That's awesome.
So yeah, so it was, and it's nice, cause then I wore my Team Challenge jersey, for the race. And I had a guy come up to me, and he was like, he's like, I was just telling my friends that he said, I have Crohn's. And he had said that he was actually someone who had been diagnosed at the age of 56. And, so he'd only been diagnosed for about 3 years. And, we were kind of talking about that and whatnot. And he said, yeah, I'm still able to do this stuff. He's like, I can tolerate nuts. And that's kind of his like pre-race thing, is that, he eats like a handful of nuts and then he's good to go. And, so it's always interesting that, and fun to wear your jersey, because people definitely do come up and make comments like that, like, oh, I have Crohn's, or, oh, I know somebody who does. And, again, those kind of talking points and, relationships that get built from that.
Well, so tell me a little bit more, because you mentioned this other person, he liked to eat nuts before the run, and we talked before about mentioning you had a gear and a supplement checklist for long runs, and so you certainly have salt, I would imagine, would be on there. The hydration belt, I'm guessing, would be on there. The noon hydration, nuts for this other guy. What were some of the other things that you would put on that list, or maybe some of the other tips or things that you saw some of the other Crohn's runners doing out there as well?
Yeah, so I usually, so most races are like super early in the morning, which I tend to find that my Crohn's symptoms tend to be worse if I have to get up early. So I usually, my pre-race breakfast is a banana. And I will normally wake up like well in advance of the race, so that basically I can eat my banana and have my restroom time before I need to go run. So, that's, kind of how I start out. And then, like I said, the noon, they have a couple, so they have kind of like they have a performance one, that you can mix up for like your long, like if you're working out for basically more than a half hour, for kind of the longer races. And then they have kind of like an everyday, tablet that you can use. So I really, every afternoon, I have, that's kind of like, some people reach for like an afternoon soda or something. That's kind of my like afternoon treat, is I, throw that in water, and have that to just kind of, stay hydrated throughout the day. And then, using the noon performance doesn't taste as good as the other noon. So someone had posted that they throw in one of the regular noon tablets with their performance stuff, and it tastes a little bit better. So I was like, oh, I gotta try that next time. But yeah, I definitely, so the salt pills, I think they also have Salt Stick, I think is the brand. They also have like potassium and a couple other things in them, to kind of help with the absorption and, with muscle cramping and whatnot. 'Cause that's one of the main things that I will get to if I'm starting to get dehydrated. I'll notice, like some, bad muscle cramps and whatnot. And, so the salt pills, though, I definitely I check with my doctor before using them, because if you have a heart condition, or there's certain, maybe certain other medications that you're taking, it's not a great idea to be downing those. So, same thing with the noon and everything. I always like to run it, basically get a second opinion, right? I always like to run that stuff by my doctor, just to make sure that, I'm not missing some interaction that I haven't thought about. So, that's definitely advice that I always give to people is, get a second opinion on anything you're trying. But, the other thing is, Honey Stinger is a brand that makes gels or, gummies, basically food to have while you're running. Because there's a lot of varying information about like how much you should eat while you're running. You don't, for like a 5K or something like that, you don't need to be eating during that. It's usually, a lot of the stuff that I see is basically every half hour. You should be, needing a little more than water, basically, is what they're, saying to, that you're sweating it out and, using up that sugar and energy. So, but Honey Stinger they use honey in a lot of their stuff, but it's pretty clean. There's not a lot of, stuff in it. 'Cause I will tell you that like gels are normally like goo, and some of those are pretty rough on like anyone's intestinal tract.
Yeah.
So like if you have IBD, be very leery of those. So Honey Stinger does make basically it's like a honey, in a
very plain
squeeze pouch, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only thing that I found that I could handle, that I can tolerate, during a run. They also have like some, like these gluten-free, like wafer waffle things they're actually pretty tasty, but, and like little gummies. They kind of look like fruit snacks. But I use the gummies a lot because I will just, like after a half hour or so, I actually just kind of set one in my mouth, and then it kind of gets rid of that like cotton mouth from running, and like let it dissolve and whatnot. So that's another product that, I learned from a lot of other IBD people that they've found that was easy to tolerate. Those are kind of the main things that I use while I'm running. I'm always still looking, for more. So the other thing
those
too
are good,
is,
those are good tips.
Yeah, the other thing that I always do, is well, I say always, but I was kind of bad with my packing this last time, where I took, some stuff out to put my shoes in the bottom of my bag, and I forgot to put some of that stuff back in my bag. So, I normally put a sunscreen on, and a lot of times I will wear a hat, and, I have my running sunglasses. You can, pretty much every running store sells them, and you can get them online as well. They're called Gooder. And they are polarized sunglasses, but they're like non-slip for when you get like sweaty and everything. And they're only $25. So they're like super, affordable and work really well. So those are like I have to have those when I run. So, I try and protect myself from the sun as well, because that also helps with not, sweating is bad, and getting sunburnt and that kind of stuff does not help your case. So so I try and do that as well. But and then obviously my other big thing is I don't try anything new like the week before a race. So I'm not introducing any new foods into my life. I'm not changing my supplements. I'm not wearing new shoes or, that kind of thing. So, I like to, whatever has worked in the past, that's what I'm using. And then after the race, if I want to try something new, that's, I'll do that during a training run or something.
That's fantastic. That's good advice, good tips, a lot of good products to try too. I think I need to get me some Noon and, be a little more hydrated throughout my day.
Yeah, and the other thing, it's very, you can get that at I've seen it at Target and I think Walmart, that, it's in the kind of the supplement, aisle. And then like Amazon and, they sell it directly from their website as well. But, it's fairly inexpensive. I think it ends up being cause there's 10 tablets in a tube. It ends up being 50 cents a serving. So it's even, cheaper than most of your sport drinks.
Yeah.
So that's I'm all about a bargain. So that's always, basically anything that's on my list is not going to like break the bank. So,
yeah.
That's definitely something else I look for, but yeah, it's definitely, a good product. I've really liked it.
Well, we have talked about a ton of stuff, and you've given a lot of great tips for long distance running. Is there anything we didn't cover that you wanted to talk about before we wrap up?
I would just say, for those that have been maybe kind of putting off, exploring things other than medication or trying to look at diet and fitness and have been kind of overwhelmed, give it a try. It really will change how you feel. It's not going to be instant, but it will, over time, it will definitely help you. And obviously we're not all cured, but we want to get as close as we can to that feeling. So if you need somebody to support you, I'm on social media, message me, I will be there for you. My main thing, the reason that I, kind of started my fitness Instagram page is because, like I said, I was very lost and alone when I was diagnosed, and I don't want people to feel that way. So if I can, help one person with their battle and for them to just feel a little bit better, like that's a success in my book. So, that's really the purpose of it. So definitely, keep trying and, put yourself first and, really take care of your health, because that ultimately everything else falls in place, once you can get that in line.
That is very well said. And if people go to find you on Instagram, where do they find you at?
I am at Carrie the Crony.
Awesome. Well, Carrie, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me again and share more. I really enjoyed visiting with you, and I appreciate everything you're doing to raise IBD awareness. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for all that you're doing as well. It's awesome.
Thank you for listening to the Crohn's Fitness Food Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have an IBD story, either as a patient or a family member, that you'd like to share as a guest on this podcast, or if you have a topic you'd like to hear about, send me an email at crohnsfitnessfood@gmail.com. If you'd like to learn more about me and my Crohn's journey, follow me on Instagram using @crohnsfitnessfood, or visit my blog for in-depth articles about my struggles and victories with Crohn's through diet, fitness, and lifestyle at www.crohnsfitnessfood.com. And finally, remember, be strong, be grateful, and be the warrior that you are.